Everybody is doing well. Another Monday afternoon here in Durham, North Carolina. And of course, it's the radio show with Mark Lee. And of course, folks gave that title after realizing my radio background and all along those lines. And definitely, it is some great weather that is taking place. Stepped outside earlier and it was a little bit cooler than it's been. And of course, there is the possibility of rain and other things coming our way also. But definitely, there is some great weather happening here in Durham, North Carolina. Like I said, the sun is shining and it's definitely a little bit of a cooler breeze. So it's not quite in the 90s and the high 90s the way it had been. And of course, with Hurricane Lee, off the coast, there is the possibility of some more severe weather coming because we definitely had some torrential downpours during several days of this past weekend. And I think they're saying we may get some more in the middle of the week. I know that we have our annual street festival coming up this weekend. So I'm hoping that whatever it does it in the middle part of the week and not toward the latter part of the week, because that would definitely be something that could put in jeopardy that particular annual event that goes on regularly. I think they definitely took off for the pandemic, even though they did a virtual reality of all along those lines about 2 years ago. But last year, and I think maybe even, definitely last year, they came back and they've come back strong. And I'm expecting them to come back strong again this year as well. So definitely looking forward to an exciting festival and for that to be some exciting times had by all. And hopefully the weather will cooperate with us and let us deal with what is going on in that space. And I know a lot of folks are paying attention to their football teams, and all along those lines, North Carolina Central University beat A&T, which is one of their arch rivals in the HBCU lanes and all in that space. And now they're going to head out to California, I believe, this weekend to play UCLA. And of course, Carolina was in a tough match with Appalachian State, but they did manage to win. And Duke also went 2-0 as they beat Lafayette after having upset Clemson the week before. So that's some of the things that are going on in that particular realm of sports. And I know folks have been paying attention to that, including with the NFL and even fantasy football, because I know I've got a fantasy football team and they actually are still in the middle of playing. So we'll see if they win. My team that I root for, the Minnesota Vikings, lost their first game. So we'll see if they can bounce back. So that's what folks are paying attention to, the sports lanes, but also the political lanes and a number of other lanes as well. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine earlier was doing a show around VR and AR. They were doing that on the World Talent Economic Forum, I believe, a World Economic Talent Forum, I think is what Sharif calls it, and all along those lines. And that can sometimes be aired here on Pod TV as well, but they were having a whole discussion around the Oculus, VR, AR, and a number of other things that I know he was part of. Rob Inderley and David Smith and others that are regulars on that forum were definitely sharing their thoughts about the importance of AR and VR and all in that kind of way. And you can actually go to their website and all of that. That is WTE forum.org and learn more about this organization and the different things that they do, because I've been part of some of their discussions and was actually invited to be on this one as well. But unfortunately, things were getting in the way in the sense of work and all along those lines here on Pod TV. So I was not able to make it to that particular one. But like I said, I oftentimes enjoy the conversations that we have on the World Talent Economic Forum, which is a global platform and has guests from all over and all in that space. As a matter of fact, they've already got things lined up for some of the ones that'll be coming up. And of course, they've discussed a variety of issues and all in that space. As a matter of fact, as I'm looking on their list, I'm seeing that later on, they will have some discussions around green technology. As a matter of fact, I think that's what they're going to be talking about on the 15th, which is Friday. They'll also be talking about the circular economy on the 13th. And of course, they'll be talking about the open source mode on tomorrow. And they'll have a conversation on the 14th around generative AI. And I say all of that to say that I know that Wayne Hind, who is going to be my first guest, has got some stuff going on in that lane and all along those lines, because he's definitely got a future business conference that'll be coming up. And I'm thinking he'll be discussing a lot about what's going on in the future and all in that space. I'm going to bring Wayne in. I've also got Galia in, and there might be others that are joining us. But you've got this conference that sounds very similar to what they were talking about on that show, because I do know that I've got some friends that are in the space of knowing about the metaverse, knowing about AI and knowing about a lot of these other kind of things that I do not know as much about, and I will definitely admit those things that I don't know, and all along those lines. But tell us about this Future Biz conference, and are we going to get into these things that are going on? I know that there have been some folks, including on some of our shows, that are speculating, that there are concerns about the job market and the way that the job market is. And then some people would be like, you don't have to worry about the job market because we'll be doing more vacation and the robots will be doing all the work. I'm not sure how I feel about that because I'm not ready for a robot to be the host of this show and all along that line. But there are some folks that are seeing what is happening in the restaurant business and a number of other businesses. And they're like, hey, there might even be a day where the president is literally a robot as well. And some people might argue, and I'm saying this with a sense of humor, that they might be a robot now that is running the government and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering your thoughts about future biz and where we are going and all in that space.
Hello, Mark. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your program. I love the intro. That's a great setup, and just it speaks so much to the environment that we're in right now with how technology is really just changing things so rapidly. Yeah, my name is Wayne Hines. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and my company is called 2020 Insight, consulting and marketing services. And we have a conference coming up, which is called Future Biz Now, and it's, as it says, the future of business is now. Technology is the impetus for the transformation that we're all experiencing. If you think of the pandemic that we all just came through, as a result of that, we know that we're all online now. We're in the digital era. Things are happening fast, and we have to adapt. Well, small, medium-sized business, entrepreneurs, and nonprofits, all these organizations, and no matter what business you're in, you have to adapt to the new way and new technology, and it's so happening so fast. And so this conference that we've got coming up is speaking just to that very issue of how technology is transforming the world of business, our daily lives, and how we can see the opportunities and not fear it. So when you look at the changes that are happening, it's impacting all areas of business. And so we have some experts in the respective fields of AI, NFT, all of the buzz that's happening today, but even more importantly is how to adjust, how to ingest the what's happening, and as a business owner and as a business leader, how do you adjust in leadership, in the space of legal aspect or data, diversity and inclusion, leveraging data. I mean, there's so many areas, business networking, so on. So technology is here to stay. And that's what the Future Biz is, really just a conference and a platform to bring people into and it's a virtual and in-person conference, bring people into a space where they can learn. They can learn and they can use that information to actually chase some great new opportunities that's on the horizon.
It sounds like some amazing opportunities and some amazing situations that could be arising. I was just wondering, Wayne, at what point did you realize that you were going to get into the technology field and all along those lines? Because I do know that I have some friends, including a dear friend that works at Cisco, Renee Daughtry, and he's definitely been in the space of teaching some of our kids about drones and about robotics and a number of other things. But I was wondering, was this something that you always knew that you were going to get into, or did you get into it at a later point in life and all along those lines?
Oh, great question. You know what? That's I could go on about this for a while now. So I'm a technology specialist. I've always been in the technology field. I went to university for computer science, and I'm not going to date myself here, but I was around before in mobile devices. And being in the space, especially in the area of software, not so much on the hardware side of things, in the area of software development, my computer science day in university. I've always just seen and love how technology is morphing and changing and affecting our lives. And I just mentioned how the pandemic has sped things up. But here's the thing: is that being in the space as a vocation, and obviously for my university days, I loved it so much that I always stayed connected and explore options. And I had the opportunity a year or so ago to write my own book about my journey. And That's how it came to be able to collate everything that I've learned, and well, not everything, but most things that I've learned, and my love for it, my passion, in this book that's called Reclaim Your Digital Gold. It's Your Power, how our personal data is changing business and society. And so this book is really a collection of the journey that I've been on as it relates to data and the importance of data. Data started out when computers, started out, right? Little nuggets of, building in the analog days of, capturing data, putting them in database and building reports and all of that. Well, as time has elapsed and changes and technologies improved, and the microchip and it's gotten smaller, and where we are today with mobile devices, that you got a computer in your pocket, essentially, or computer in your hand. Now we're in the digital world, moved from the analog to the digital space, where data is so valuable that it now is almost as valuable. Well, actually, there's an article that was written by The Economist that says data is as valuable as oil. This was written in 2017. I talked about that article in my book. But my passion led me to write that book. And of course, as I said, I've always been in the space in the data analytics and technology and even AI, because even in university back in the day, it was a theory course he was taking, right? AI, artificial intelligence. To see it come where it is today, it's just incredible. So my area of interest, expertise has been in the technology space throughout my entire career. I remember, I write about this in the book. I remember in high school, when we were using, I said I wasn't going to date myself, but here we go. We were using the Commodore computers back in the day. All right. They just introduced them in a lab class. And I took the computer class, and, I had one of my first loves at the time was actually art, art in terms of drawing and sketching. I used to love that. But when I got into this computer class, I actually fell in love with computers, if I can use that word. I saw something that was about to happen. We actually did a special project, which I chose that project. Me and my partner, we did a lot of research for it, and I chose to investigate how the computer chip, which was at the time being put into Denon and some of the music equipment at the time. Denon was one of my music equipment I was using, in terms of audio and we all love our music. So I was exploring how they were using these computer chips to enhance the sound. And I write about them in the book, as my early journey. And I fell in love with oh my goodness, this is technology and this chip, and it can be anywhere. And it's just, in anything. And I decided, I was going to park my interest in art, and I was going to pursue computer science. And I went to University of Computer Science, and I haven't looked back on it. I live vicariously now through artists as opposed to doing any kind of drawings myself, which I love the artist community. But the space of technology and what it's doing for us in terms of efficiencies and growth and business and our personal lives is an incredible thing that's happening, and we're in a time right now like none other, and we're living through this. So the book I wrote is all about how our data is so valuable that it's the foundation, part of the major foundation that's propelling us forward.
You think enough people understand that value of data and the value of the computer? And by the way, I can date myself as well, because I remember when I was in college in the early 80s, there was entire computer labs that took up entire rooms and all in that space. So they literally took up the room. Is not what is going on now, because now you've got the relatively small laptops. And like you said, the phone has got a lot of computer power and all in that space. And I have a friend that does an event. It's called the Black Business Olympics. And I know he oftentimes talks about how much excess and how much power we have just in the phone, because as you just mentioned, it is a computer. It is a method of communications. It's a method of a number of things. So I was just wondering, do you think that society as a whole understands what they have at their disposal with the computer as one that is in that lane?
Oh my goodness, that's a loaded question, Mark, and because you've hit a nail. You struck the nail so well here, in that there's a gap in the understanding, because things are happening so fast. right? I mean, I don't want to use a bad analogy, but I mean, when things are moving so fast and you're just caught up in it, maybe a good or decent analogy is like being in a rushing stream, right? And you jump in the stream and you're being carried by that stream, that water, right? A river, rushing river, maybe that's better, right? And you're being carried by it, all right? You're still functioning, but you're being carried and swept away by that. So that's kind of the analogy of that. I write about a couple of examples in my book, okay? And to give people the perspective, and I can give you a quick overview of the table of contents and so on shortly, but there's one particular story I just want to share, okay, in terms of the value. LinkedIn is, I know you stream on LinkedIn, and we are all very involved in LinkedIn, a business, and it's a wonderful business platform and community. But LinkedIn is a tremendous global platform, tremendous in so many ways of connecting business individuals and so on. Microsoft bought LinkedIn in 2016, all right, and they paid $26.2 billion with a B for LinkedIn. Now, I'm going to park that for a minute just to give you an example here. So let's look at the Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company, okay, has been around 100 plus years. I'm just going to throw that out, all right? They've made billions of dollars over the year, and they've got a valuation. I'm not going to pick a valuation, but they've got a significant valuation, right? But if you heard somebody bought them, you go, oh wow, Microsoft has been around 50, 60, 70 years. I'm not going to give exact numbers, just is for demonstration purposes. Microsoft has been around that long, and LinkedIn has been around also to maybe 20 years. All right. Again, not exact numbers, but roughly. The point I'm making there is, see a company like Ford Motor Company versus Microsoft versus LinkedIn. And LinkedIn was bought for $26.2 billion with a B by Microsoft. Why? If I said, or somebody said, oh, they bought Ford for that much, you go, oh yeah, that's okay. They've got products. They've got, right. Not that LinkedIn doesn't have products. That's what they got. History and a tangible, significant amount of equity, et cetera, and all that. Well, so does LinkedIn, but it's a different types of equity. It's a different type of value. It's a data value. Mm-hmm. And actually, I wrote a blog about that on my, I've got a couple of platforms where I blog on, and so that shows you in itself, okay, that the perception of a future value of a company, or the future value of the assets. Let's not say, right. Let's go with that. The assets in this case being data. Now, LinkedIn, you can, of course, they have products. There's subscriptions. There's different offerings and so on there. But by comparison, a 100-year-old company versus a 20-year-old company, or give or take, and 26 billion.
Yeah,
someone knows something.
26 billion is a lot, and that means that people know stuff. One of the things that we've been talking about on the network, I'm actually a proponent of it. There are folks that are on the network that aren't as big of a proponent as I am and everything, but I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I am of the opinion that there is a definite digital divide. Some of it is around class and race. Some of it is around country existence and everything. So I'm actually a fan of what some people call internet for all and all along those lines, because I think that we need to definitely make sure that the internet is accessible to all kinds of folks and all in that space. Now, I've had some people that have pushed back on me saying that the farmer or the villager in the backwoods of Africa or in the rainforest may not need the internet as much as some of us Westerners do. And I'm like, well, if we are a global world, then we probably need to make sure that it is accessible to them. I'm not saying that it needs to be maybe as accessible as water and food, but I would definitely think that it needs to be at least have the potential to have access to it no matter where you are in the world and everything. And like I said, I've got some pushback by some of my cohorts are here on the network about that, but I would love to hear your thoughts as to whether this is a legitimate thing that we need to have, and is it a legitimate concern that they have that the guy that's doing sheep farming in Australia may not need or want the internet and all in that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so the digital divide is real. That's my research And based on the research, that's the conclusion that I wrote. And in fact, I write about it in the book. I write about it extensively in chapter 2, information is power, and then getting into chapter 3, where we talk about the collection and the harvesting of data. All right, and then after in that I jump into even the new economy and the future, and then some other chapters here I'll go through shortly. But in those 3 areas, I talk extensively about this digital divide, because if you look at countries that are, first of all, even in countries that are the developed countries, where we're a wealthy nation and so on, you still have poorer communities that don't have access to technology, or don't have access to the internet, or they have to go to a library, or they have to go through, right? If you look at take that and go into other countries that where they are underdeveloped, well, you have a different situation, that they may not have the infrastructure in place. They may not have the internet highway. And I write about that again in the evolution of the internet. It was back in the day, it was called, again, dating myself, it's called the information highway and so on. Well, it's a highway. You build an infrastructure, right? It was infrastructure in the sky in the, back in the .com days, right? In the late 90s or early 90s. However, today we have information gap, and we also have a digital divide, and we have the information infrastructure gap. So countries that have not put the investment into building their highway or into internet highways, and there's some countries that have, but even in both cases, you have accessibility issues. And then you have cultural differences, because when you go to different countries, right? And I write about this again because based on the research I've done, is that there's certain cultures where certain people don't have, women versus men don't have the equal opportunity access. So those are huge things that when you look at the future where it's going, that it does create a disparity that we're going to have to deal with, right? And another point, I'm going to give you actually a quick story for a moment, just after this, about a TV show that I love to quote. But just when it comes to the digital divide, it's like having someone has access to a vehicle or a car, a bike, whatever. But guess what? All right. If you have access to it and someone else don't, you have more opportunities. It could be for revenue, it could be for making, variety of things, getting around or whatever. Somebody else doesn't have access to it. Guess what? They're inhibited, right? And so, yes, the digital divide, in my opinion, is very real. I'm going to give you one other story about, there's a TV show that I love to watch, and it's a car manufacturer, fictitious car manufacturer. And they tackle the issues of in a fun, humorous way of car manufacturing industry and the technology that drives them and so on. And in this one particular episode, they were tackling AI, automatic driving vehicles or automated vehicles, and they manufacture this. But they the leadership went for a walk on the out in the where they're doing the testing. Okay, I've lost my train of thought on the exact wording there, but they're out where they're doing the testing of the vehicles and so on. And so what was interesting about it, and this is just hilarious, but it shows you a little bit of some of the challenges that we face when it comes to perspective on the technology and the development of it. And so we have the vice president, who was a black individual, very incredibly talented and gifted, and he's just an innovative mind, right? And he's part of building this technology, for their new line of vehicles. And then the president, she's a wonderful lady that's so humorous, and she takes all of her guidance from her people and so on, and she's out there, and she's a Caucasian lady that just loves to work together as a team. So they're walking now, and they're talking, and they're crossing over the testing of these vehicles. She walks in front of an automated guided vehicle, and she looks at it, and she, oh my goodness, it's driving by itself. Oh, it's so exciting, And the the head engineer and the vice president is touting it. Oh yeah, it's the greatest thing that we've ever put together. It's going to be wonderful for the future. He walks in front of the vehicle and hits him, and it hits him.
Wow.
And the humor in that, I know it's, tongue in cheek here, but the humor in that was like, oh my goodness, it's got some biases in it. It's got some built-in biases, and they started going bantering back and forth why it hit him and it didn't hit her and so on. But it's tongue in cheek, but it just goes to show you about when it comes to technology, there are a number of challenges that we've got to deal with. There's the gap, yes, the gap, social aspects of it, and so on, the biases that are inherent in the technology and so on. So I know I went off a little bit there on a question, but I wanted to get that story in because it's just hilarious.
I appreciate that story, and I was actually going to bring in our other guests as well, and we might have some others that'll be joining in the conversation. But I know that a lot of things that happen within our conversations is the nature of stress, and there are a number of folks that are even concerned about stress when it comes to technology and things along those lines. I do know that there are some folks that have gotten fully involved in the computer lanes and are even in the older ages. I'm in my early 60s, but I do know that there are some folks that are even like my parents' ages, their 80s, that are very much involved in computers and loving computers. There are others that aren't as engaged. I sometimes joke about my mom, who definitely has a AOL account and has some other accounts, but sometimes she doesn't want to get as much involved in the social media, and we know social media can add to the stress and all those lines. So she sometimes will jump on one of my aunt's account, one that still is living and another that has passed, to find out what me and my younger brother are doing and all along those lines. So I've got Dr. Gelia Gorman on, and like I said, she's definitely talked about different kinds of stress. And I would think that would be a case of toxic stress versus garden variety stress. So I'm thinking mom's not really being stressed about finding out what me and my younger brother are doing. So that might be more of the garden variety stress. But we do know, because one of the shows that we have here on the network is around bullying, and it's all called Where's the Love, and it features a mother and her son, both of who were bullied in relationships and not bullied at work as well. As a matter of fact, I think they're going to do one around cyberbullying coming up shortly, and then later on they've done some around work bullying, but they'll do some others around work bullying as well. So I would love to hear your thoughts about stress, and even stress as it plays into what we've been talking about with Wayne with technology, because I do know some folks are good, they're like, I can't get it, I don't understand it, I'm stressing out about it, and all along those lines. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Well, thanks for having me back, Mark. It's nice to be here. And I love that you're using the language garden variety stress. Just to help your listeners differentiate, I refer to the stress that we're just normally accustomed to as garden variety stress. But in my book, What's Your Kryptonite, I talk about toxic stressors. And this can be when just regular garden variety stress kind of escalates to become sort of toxic in our world. But it's also possible that toxins we don't even recognize, which equates to kryptonite, are creating stress. And then we've really got to get to the bottom of what's going on. But just referring to technology to give that, as an example, I'll just use my own example. I am really sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies. And so when I am on my computer a lot, I use devices to help kind of break that up so that it doesn't really get absorbed by my body and create toxicity. And so that is a toxic stressor. It's an invisible stressor that we sort of wouldn't even know to watch for, except for we're feeling not great and maybe starting to see some odd symptoms. And it tends to happen when we spend too much time at the computer, right? Certainly, we're also sitting in our chair too much, and that can contribute to it as well. But then if you're just talking about using technology and the stress associated with using technology, that's more of a garden variety stress, like a regular stressor, just trying to learn something new. That's one of the things that we do in our life to actually enhance our life, right? We're constantly learning and growing and expanding. And so, we take on these stressors, learning something new, and sometimes we push ourselves a little too far, too fast, and then it becomes a little unmanageable, and maybe we need to dial it back, take it a little slower, get a coach to help you. So that just maybe gives people some ideas of how to differentiate between just regular healthy stress that maybe has escalated versus a stress that has really become toxic in your life, and is affecting your health, your body.
Yeah, and along those same lines, well, a couple of questions just popped in my head and everything. One is definitely a health-related question that I'll get to you, Dr. Gorman, and everything in a second. And all along those lines, because it actually came up in one of our earlier shows, we were actually talking about media and media's impact, and all along those lines with our media show and even on our economic show. And I'll get to what we brought up that a lot of people are concerned about. But there is a show that a friend of mine does. It's like I mentioned it to Wayne earlier, called the Black Business Olympics, and there is a mantra that they have. It is called "Genius is Common." It is this notion that we all have a genius within us, and that we need to recognize that genius, and that it doesn't always mean that you're a Mensa person and all in that space. So if you're an amazing cook, that might be your genius. If you are a amazing drone pilot, that might be your genius, and that is what we need to recognize, is that we all have skills that we bring into the forefront. And I definitely agree with Bruce George, the person that created that, and he was a leader in the hip hop world and all in that space. He was part of the Def Jam and Def Comedy and a number of those other kind of things that existed in that lane. So I agree with him. But the flip side of that, and that's where your book comes in, is I guess that if we all have a genius, we also have a kryptonite, because like there is something that we all are very much proud of and everything. We all have our Achilles heels. I have said on this show, and I've said on a number of other shows, that going to school, and I've dated myself earlier, but when I was at Marquette, my Achilles heel was something that had to do with somewhat technology, but it was like math, and it was particularly around statistics, which is why I took a statistics course at UNC instead of Marquette, where I went to school. And the serious Achilles heel, which I still have to this day, is foreign language. And I know that foreign language is important in our world, but I was not having that much of a great time in terms of understanding the different language structures that exist from other countries. So that was my Achilles heel. So I'm guessing that would be like what a kryptonite is and everything. So I guess my question to both of you is, what do you consider your genius, and what do you consider your kryptonite? Because we all have a kryptonite and everything. So since you came in later and everything, I'll start with you, Dr. Gorman, but I do want to hear from Mr. Hines as well. So what do you consider your true genius, and what do you consider as your Achilles heel? And I'll start with you, Dr. Gorman.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I talk actually a lot about the zone of genius in my work. One of my favorite books is The Big Leap, written by Gay Hendricks. And he talks about essentially working in your zone of genius and recognizing what that is for you. And you're 100% correct in that it is very much an individual thing. I love to teach and do that in a lot of different ways, including, as you know, writing and create videos. And I'm in the process right now of just putting the finishing touches on a new program that I'm releasing. And so that is definitely my zone of genius. That's where, when I'm working in that space, I just feel really, some describe it as, it doesn't feel like work, and time sort of stands still. You're not like looking at the clock, when will this be over, kind of thing. But I think that that one of the things that happens that actually creates stress in our lives and can be kryptonite in this sort of scenario is maybe when we kind of just had some success in some area that has led us into work that really isn't fulfilling for us, but we are pretty good at it. Gay in his book talks about, working in our zone of excellence, or, where we're really good at it, but it's not our zone of genius. It's not what we really love. It's not where our heart really wants to play, right? And so when we end up kind of getting stuck in that zone of excellence versus zone of genius, it becomes stressful for us because we can't figure out how to get out of our current successful situation to step into what we really want to do, right? So so that's actually a fantastic example of a good stressor gone bad. where it was good stress initially. It's always fun to explore something that you're good at, but it is possible that if you're not careful is maybe a strong word there, but if you're if you lose sight of what your real goal is, what you really love to do, then it's possible to spend your life doing something that you're good at and that you have success at, but maybe is not really what makes your heart sing.
Yeah, I hear you. And Wayne, I'd love to hear your answers as well. One of the things that I've heard about and it sometimes is frustrating is I sometimes differentiate between a job and a career. I think a career is something that you are, like you just said, Dr. Gorman, passionate about it, that you have a interest in it and all of that. But I do think that there are a number of people that literally go to the job because it's helping them pay the bills. And we know that we have to pay the bills in order to survive. So I am of the fear that there are a lot of people, and maybe technology will change this, that are literally going to work and it's kind of like in a survival mode. They're not going to work because they have a passion for what they are doing, but they're going to work because it is something to do to pay the bills and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Wayne, as to your kryptonite as well as your genius. But that's just something that popped into my head as well.
Yeah, I love what Dr. Gala said about getting stuck and getting in a different zone versus stuck, right? I mean, I love that. That's a great analogy and also an expose on that there. For me, my genius is, and it's kind of like fuel to me, right? And that is, the technology and the various things of giving insights when it comes to insight. I wrote about this in the beginning of the book. When I was able to put it on paper, I'm like, my goodness, this confirms my life's journey. To be able to see, in
he'll come back.
certain things, to be able to see certain things into the future and just to watch it come to fruition. And then, that you get that aha moment. And it's not just once, it's over and over again because the different areas of my life, right? That's like fuel. That's so encouraging and so insightful. And it's not about fearing it. It's just about, the revelation of it, right? And so for me, that is really exciting. That's just, and when I'm in the zone in that area, it's very fulfilling. So I not only am I inspired, but I inspire others. Out of me flows, creativity, innovation. And when I'm in that space, again, back to what Dr. Gallo was saying, my kryptonite, okay, I've come to learn is not knowing what you don't know.
Wow, that's like the perfect definition of kryptonite, right?
Because we tend to operate in a framework of, we know it all and so on. We're human beings we're living a journey where we're unfolding life each and every day. We're unfolding, we're learning new things, right? And I've learned to be careful to stay out of that zone where you think you know it all. And I'm not, going down that path, that rabbit hole, okay? But it's what you don't know that you don't know. That's a blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
The way I describe kryptonite, when people ask me to well, how do I know what my kryptonite is? I say, well, it's not easy. If we could figure out what our kryptonite is, we would easily eliminate it, right? But if you think of the superheroes in the movies, Superman, Superwoman, they just feel their energy draining.
Yes.
They,
right.
If kryptonite was sitting in the middle of the dining room table, they'd take one look at it and go, oh, heck no, I can't stay, or that's got to go, right? That's not the way it happens. They just feel their energy draining and they say, there has got to be some kryptonite here. You know,
Right.
like it's got to be somewhere and I got to find it before I'm a goner, right? And so that's a great example to say, you know, a lot of times we have these preconceived notions that are the product of a lot of information that we've curated over the years. And sometimes those paradigms that we've established as a result just have to be busted through. And that can be really challenging. And
speaking of those paradigms being busted, and this is actually to Wayne, but I'm sure you might have some thoughts around this as well, Dr. Gelia, because I think kryptonite, and I'll use the kryptonite example, isn't just a personal thing. I think that sometimes industries can also have kryptonite as well. And one of the kryptonites that I think that exists in the technology world is the need to be prepared to let all people in. So like acceptance and all in that space. So I know that there are folks that are having challenges because of their handicaps, be that mental or physical handicaps. And I think that that is a kryptonite to the technology industry, because I don't know that the technology industry has, while they are working on it, I don't know that they have quite addressed how to deal with folks that need to use these devices that might have different kinds of disabilities to cope with, whether that is something around their mental health or their physical health or a number of other things. But as one that is in that lane, do you think that that is a issue that is being addressed enough by the technology industry, or can they do a better job of making sure that the person that is disabled, whether that is physically, mentally, or emotionally, is able to cope with all these wonderful devices like the Oculus and other things in that space?
I can just touch on that briefly. Just what's interesting about the technology revolution and the digital era is that it's providing us access to information that we didn't have before. Information, there is quantitative data, and qualitative data. The human, we give off emotions and feelings and all kinds of stuff. Well, technology is able to, we get I'm sure one of you may even have your iWatch on or your Apple Watch and so on, which measures your temperature or measures your heart rate and all this. So the data that you're getting from that becomes valuable in how it gets used. It's the same thing that's being applied in to some of the areas of the less disenfranchised or less fortunate individuals that we categorize in our society, and using the data and the technology to help the blind see, for example, or to help someone who is disabled physically. Data becomes a different sensory than the main life sensories that we've relied on, the five senses, right? So now data becomes another sensory that helps those individuals. So the beauty of technology is that it's actually helping in some of those areas. There's been stories, and I wrote about this in one chapter of my book, where someone's life was saved because the technology was able to find their location. They were in the middle of the woods somewhere, and there's many stories like this, but this one specifically comes to mind. Where their life was in danger, and they couldn't have the access to any kind of emergency, but someone was able to ping their location, and their life was saved. So that's a form of just how technology is used, in specifically with regard to that example, but in the disabled community, or the less fortunate or underdeveloped communities and so on. Technology is suddenly becoming a tool and a sensory. Again, what is it doing here? It's capturing information that we don't, we take time to process information. Okay, we take time. Okay, life experience and journeys. and then we tell each other about it and so on. Well, technology is just taking that data, factually processing it, and spitting out a result. Boom. That's the analytics, and there you get into AI, okay? Where AI can do it that much faster than any human being because it has all the sensory and all the information that's available to us. So I think what's happening in that area is that the opportunities are able to help, different disenfranchised individuals like never before.
Yeah, I can see that and everything. I'd love to hear Dr. Gail your thoughts, but one of the other things I was thinking about, even with AI, is that there are some folks that are concerned as to whether AI will ever be fully sentient and all in that space. I know that right now, one of the other jobs that I have right now, we're on hiatus because the kids have to come to school and I literally take the test and all of that. But I work for a testing company, and right now that job has not been fully replaced by AI because there are nuances that exist within the human spirit, even with our young kids, that AI hasn't quite mastered. So they want us humans to test against the AI to make sure that there is some controls are going on in that space, and that may change eventually, and eventually they may not need the humans, but right now they still need at least a few of us humans to make sure that if a student is bringing their perspective of, say, rural Ohio or rural Iowa, or they're bringing a perspective from the Comptons, that we understand that, where the AI might not understand those nuances and all in that space. But is that going to always be the case, Mr. Hines, or do you think that there will be a time when they are more able to understand our human qualities, whether that is good or bad qualities, and all in that space?
Is that directed to Dr. Galler or myself? Sorry, I missed that.
To you first, Wayne, and then I definitely want to hear from Dr. Galler as well.
Absolutely. So, you know what? We're in a major transformative stage right now in our society, in our life, for our lifetime. And technology is playing such an important role in that. AI is fast pacing things so rapidly. The thing is that AI does have the potential. I mean, there's a lot of whistleblowers, a lot of communications going out right now about the dangers and all of that. And yes, but we're in the early stages. And we're a people of solution. We're people of creativity. We're our species have always been able to overcome. And so we don't know what the future holds. Yes, there are dangers and so on, but I like to be not much of an alarmist. I like to look at where we are here, and yes, but the potential dangers. We don't have legislation right now. We don't have the guide rails that's needed for data, some of the privacy things are being. So we're learning as we go. The problem is that it's happening faster than it's developing, the technology is happening faster than these things are coming. So yes, when you look at AI, even just the Chat GPT, I'll just pick on that for a moment because that's been the rage lately. And ironically enough, when I did my research last year, I for the book, I came across OpenAI, which is a parent company for that, and I wrote extensively about some of the things that they have on the radar. And Chat GPT is one. I didn't know it would be this transformative, but I wrote it from the perspective of data being food for AI. So AI is consuming data. Right now, ChatGPT was let loose on the internet of data. That's all of our data that's been thrown out there that's just consuming and digesting. So one of us have the knowledge, but how many of us combined? What does that? Yes, that's much. AI is much more have a depth and breadth of the information that we do individually. It's like an encyclopedia, right? And beyond that. So the long answer, I sort of going on a little bit here, but try and shorten it up here, is that yes, technology, AI is very knowledgeable, and will be even smarter if it's only to think that it's in the early stages here. And it can be an issue in the future. There is signs that says that it could, because if it outsmarts us. And there's many whistleblowers and people who are much smarter than me, and in the tech industry and so on. They're all out there saying that. But I also do believe that if we're where we are right now, and we have the opportunity to make adjustments and to learn and to as a human species, I believe that we have the ability to be able to put in the guardrails, put those things in place, right, and address some of the immediate concerns.
Yeah. Love to hear your thoughts, Dr. Gelia. And I alluded to it earlier. I do know that one of the fears, and maybe it's one of those unre- unsubstantial stressors and everything, but I do know that there has been some people both in the science fiction lane as well as in the real lane that are concerned that if AI keeps developing, that who's to say that we won't have a president AI at some point or another, and all along those lines, because that is definitely something that definitely is out there in the science fiction lane. But there are folks that are saying, hey, it could happen sooner versus later, and maybe it's an unsubstantiated stressor. But they also said that UFOs and Loch Ness were unsubstantiated as well, and there are folks that are still stressing about that also. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about these kind of things as stressors in addition.
There's an argument to be made that an AI generated president would be preferable over, some of our other options. So I just thought I would throw that out there. I use ChatGPT myself fairly regularly, so it blows me away. I 100% am a adopter of technology. So no accident that we're on here together today, Wayne. But I was thinking about how technology and data in particular is being used to improve our health and well-being, because a lot is spoken about how it is a detriment to our health. Right? But how is it actually improving our health? And so one of the things I was thinking about is how, as we accumulate data, so one of the things a lot of people use now is an Aura ring. And if you know what an Aura ring is, basically it's a ring that I have one. I took it off before I took a big trip a couple of months ago, and I haven't put it back on. But it basically just accumulates data 24/7, tracks our sleep patterns, heart rate variability, those kinds of things. And it accumulates that data so that then we can see patterns and we can see where issues might be developing. A lot of people say, if I ask them, how do you sleep? They say, oh, I sleep fine. Fine means there's got to be a problem. Because fine is never fine. So I sleep fine. And, if you put an Aura ring on them for a few weeks, you would find that their sleeping is not fine. And nothing, what I always say is nothing good happens if you're not sleeping well. So, so that's just an example. But then I was also thinking about my nephew, who is a type 1 diabetic. He was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes when he was, I don't know, like 12-ish probably. And over the years, it was a massive struggle to regulate his blood sugar for a number of different reasons. Type 1 diabetes is extremely challenging. It's not just dietary, there's physical components. But he now wears a monitor that regularly monitors his blood sugar and microdoses insulin based on need. So you're not guessing how much insulin you need to correct a blood sugar spike. You are getting the exact dose you need to regulate it, like in the short period of time. And then your blood sugar is going to be managed or measured again, not that far down the road, to determine, did that microdose correct it enough? Are we good now? It also then allows you to see, because you're going to, again, have all that data accumulated. It allows you to see when your blood sugar really spiked and easily correlate that with a stressor. It could be like just physical stress, or it could be you ate something that really was not appropriate for somebody dealing with diabetes, right? But data is really powerful and helps us make decisions that are really well informed. There is definitely an element in my work of kind of intuition almost, because I deal with really complex cases that are not just straightforward. But data is still really valuable because I need to connect the dots. I need to be able to identify moments in time when stress spiked and see if we can then try to reverse engineer it. What actually was causing the problem at the time?
And speaking of that, Dr. Gorman, I said I was going to allude to this earlier and everything. One of the conversation points that came up, which I know is a topic that you are very much interested in, and all along those lines, on one of our earlier shows, they were actually talking about the pandemic and COVID and a number of other things, but they were talking about how one of the issues that is kind of like one of those elephants in the room that wasn't talked about as much during the pandemic was the impact of obesity, because we don't want to body shame and we don't want to do things along those lines. But it is a known fact that if folks that had a more healthier frame, or I won't say thinner because we all have different body types. Some of us are naturally big boned, as the expression goes, and all of that. But if you are doing things to help in that space and trying to control it, but we don't even talk about it in our school systems as much as we used to, and we definitely don't talk about it on media as much as we used to. So how much of the issue of obesity is even being addressed by the public, and is that a major stressor as well? Because like I said, I do know that people get caught up in the body shaming aspect of their weight and everything, so that can be a stressor, and just like technology, it can be a problem conversation. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because I do know that you do a lot of work in that space, and I don't think that the mainstream media talks about it enough. Every once in a while you get a first lady or maybe a president that will bring the issue of exercise into their regimen, but not so much the obesity conversation. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, Dr. Gorman.
Yeah, Michelle Obama was an awesome first lady and really promoting health and well-being, and just like grassroots sort of approach to health and well-being. I really appreciated her work there. So most of the women that come into my clinic, whether that's online or physically, the first thing they care about is their weight. That weight has accumulated. So we don't have to body shame anyone. They're feeling it. If somebody is overweight, they know it. They don't feel well, and that sometimes it's described almost as just feeling toxic. And most of the time when I work with somebody and I use a biofield scanning process that helps me kind of identify the stressors that aren't just your common stressors that would be picked up by a normal lab test. But I will identify several things typically that are causing stress for that individual, and I tell them that they need to really avoid those things for a period of time, and that once their body, kind of builds some resilience again, they may be able to reintroduce it, but we won't know that until we clean things up first.
Okay, that makes a lot.
So what ends up happening, what? I'm sorry, Mark.
I said, go ahead. I was waiting for the rest of your answer.
Okay. So what ends up happening is they eliminate this, short list of things, and the weight just falls off. They don't have to go on some crash extreme diet. It's not about, I like to say that a calorie restriction, like severe calorie restriction, is a race to the bottom. All that's going to happen is it's going to work initially because your body's going to basically need some time to adjust. But once your body adjusts to essentially surviving on the lower number of calories, then, basically now you have done nothing but damage your metabolism. So with obesity, I believe that you can trace it back to some buildup of toxicity. And again, that's not just a single one size fits all type of toxicity. It could come from a lot of different places. But toxicity affects our body's ability to create energy, and it's internal energy that uses what we consume and allows it essentially not to build up. And when it builds up, our body stores it wherever it can find a place, and then it turns to fat.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. Wayne, I know you've got to bounce off, and I've got one other guest that'll be coming on very shortly as well. But one of the things I get all my guests to do is to share, because Pod TV is a global network, a message of positivity and hope for our entire global community, and also where you can be reached. And if you want to tell folks quickly how they can learn more about the Future Biz Conference and all in that space, and also about your book as well. So I know you've got to bounce off to your 3:00 meeting, and we've still got roughly about 45 minutes to an hour to go in the show, but I've still got Dr. Gorman as well as Brett that'll be joining me shortly as well. But definitely, if you'll just let folks know how they can reach you and a message of positivity and hope that you would like to share.
Yes, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Mark. And Dr. Gallo, it's a pleasure being on with you here. You know, the hope is, for me, is that we're in a future of transformative time. It's like none other in our lifetime. And so you can either, embrace it or fear it. And I think if you embrace it, think of all the opportunities and the possibilities and just the life journeys that's ahead of us. You mentioned earlier, you're tongue in cheek, you said, AI is going to take over. I'm going to have more vacation time. What an awesome way to look at that. We're going to have more free time. So I'm not an alarmist. I'm a pragmatist, and I believe that you can have a lot of things going on, and just make sure that you're aware of it. Get on, be a part of it. Don't just put it off to the side and it won't affect me or whatever. So I would say yes. Allow the future, which is the title of the conference was intentionally called that, Future Biz Now. The future of business is now, and just like our future, of living in this new world is now. And so you can go to futurebiznow.com for the conference to sign up. We've got a great lineup of speakers. We have 18 speakers, including myself, that's going to be talking about things from the impact of AI in a legal perspective to leadership transformation. Some of the leadership now, we've got to deal with leadership online. You've got the individuals that are remotely operating and so on, and all those things, and technology, generative AI and just an AI and other things such as NFTs, blockchain. Just each of these folks are in their own lane that they're going to bring to the conference. And we have, even Mr. James Watkins, who's one of the original drifters, who's also a speaker at our conference. He's coming in to do this conference, and he has been transforming the entertainment industry, to his Janubi company, which is about leveraging AI and technology and streaming and all these things that are happening and revolutionizing these industries. Every sector of society is affected by this. And so we have speakers from all areas of life, even diversity and inclusion, and how to use AI in that area, in that space. So the speaker list is on the website, futurebiz.now/speakers, and you can go to there. You can see the program that's outlined there. It's a one-day event. We're cramming so much into a day. Although we have a bonus day, which is also a bonus tourism day. It's in Toronto. Toronto is where the conference is. It's just outside of Toronto, and really, it's a real incredible opportunity to see what's going on and how we can leverage the information to make our business, especially our entrepreneurs, some of our entrepreneurs out there that are really just trying to figure out, how do I do all getting bombarded? So futurebiz.now.com, you can get the information about you can register, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can register for virtual access because we're streaming it, or you can be in person. Come on to Toronto for this one day, and plus the bonus day of the tourism day, where we're taking folks to a historical community. Listen, this is a point in time, and I just want to encourage people to come on out. And the last thing I'll say is about my book. My book was the impetus for this. When I wrote the book, I had no idea this journey would unfold the way it is, because I wrote it about data, my passion, my technology, and how in technology and how it's transforming the world. And some of the chapters I had in here, really about things such as the social media, the new scoring society, keeping your data safe, monetizing your data, social platform, metaverse, blockchains and, the Web 3.0 and all those, which is just, a teaser of some things. These folks that are coming to the conference are expounding on these topics. They're the experts. And so my book is on Amazon. You can reach it, Reclaim Your Digital Gold. And you can go to Amazon and search for my name or search for the title, and you'll see it there. It's over 200 pages of just great content information to not cause us to fear, but cause us to act. And at the end of each chapter, I give what is called, sorry, I had to use it. Get your gold nuggets. Reclaim your digital gold. I give gold nuggets, which are tips, about how you can, stay out of that zone of, fear or any kind of, health issues, concern, sort of mental health concerns or so on, which, is a real concern to me. So I want to thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, Wayne Hines, out of Toronto, Canada, 2020 Insight Consulting and Marketing. Reclaim Your Digital Gold is available online and most platforms, but certainly Amazon. And futurebiznow.com conference in October 25th, 2023.
I appreciate it. Like I said, I brought in Brett as well. Brett is in the digital lane also and definitely does some conferences in that space and definitely has done some different business in that lane as well. As a matter of fact, he has done digital marketing. He's done other things. And I've actually got to ask him about what it was like to work with a major actor and all along those lines, because he actually got a major actor to be involved in that space as well. But before I get to Brett, Wayne, any messages you have of positivity and hope that you wanted to give for that global community? Because in that answer, that's the one thing that I didn't hear and everything. So if there's any messages you want to give of positivity and hope for our global audience.
Yeah, again, it really, just be encouraged. The times we're in right now is very transformative and creative and innovative, and just embrace it. Embrace it. We can do so much when we come together and when we embrace, instead of fearing it. So I just want to encourage folks that it's a wonderful time right now. It's a wonderful time to be alive right now. And too many things we're focused on that's negative. Let's focus on the positive and take that.
Definitely appreciate that and everything. Like I said, Brett has joined us as well, and I know he's got a company that is doing a lot of work in that space. One of his companies is called Featured, and that is he is the founder and CEO of that, and it is a opportunity for folks to connect subject matter experts with top publishers to increase their exposure and create quality, ready to publish Q&A content. So you might have to get with Dr. Gorman and even Wayne and create some things that they have been talking about, because they definitely seem to be subject matter experts. And like I said I was going to teach you when I saw some of your other background and everything, Brett, and I saw that you had actually worked with a major actor, that being Hugh Jackman, I should say, to launch a charitable coffee company. So how did that even come about, and what was it like working with Mr. Jackman? Because we know that sometimes people have a perception of what it would be like to work with celebrities, even in the space of entrepreneurship. But definitely it sounds like whatever y'all did must have worked, because y'all got acquired by Keurig, and I know that is not exactly a small company that acquired you, and all in that space. So just wondering how that even came about, and whether you were hanging around the Hollywood types, or whether he approached you, or how this even came about being.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Mark. And yeah, definitely could share the story about launching a charitable coffee company. So it was just happenstance. I joined a very small digital marketing agency. They needed some social media expertise, and at the time, Laughing Man Coffee and Tea was just getting started. So it was me, Hugh, a barista, and their co-founder, David, and basically launched it from an idea to becoming a thriving charitable coffee company that gave a portion of the proceeds back to farmers out in Africa. And so that was a pretty fun ride. It was very eye-opening to work with a celebrity like Hugh Jackman, in the sense that there's lots of fans who are very eager to support initiatives that he was doing. So yeah, very, very cool chapter.
Sounds like it. And I saw another chapter, because I know that a lot of people are trying to survive. We were talking about stress earlier, and sometimes when you're stressing, you sometimes will find foods that are easy to fix and all along those lines. I know that back in my college days, and even sometimes today, I will get some pork and beans, or I might get some ramen noodles and other things because sometimes the money isn't flowing the way that you would like it to. And there was a company that I know a lot of folks are very familiar with called Hot Pockets, and apparently you had some work with them as well. So I'm sure the folks would love to hear as to how you got involved with them and even what that whole process was like. Because, like I said, I do know what a Hot Pockets is, and I know that they are definitely a major thing for folks that are struggling and trying to figure out a economical way to eat and all in that way. And apparently there was a food company that you were working with that was going to give an unlimited supply of Hot Pockets. I should have met you earlier.
Mark, you're bringing up, thank you for the positioning and also bringing up a portion of my life that I try to forget quite often. But so just to put it in perspective, it was one of my very first startups. It was a career education website, and was looking to get it up off the ground, had just left my job as a corporate auditor, and basically gave myself 3 months to get the funding necessary to kickstart it and get going. And so me and my friend, who I was paying approximately $6 an hour to sleep on my couch and to help with the fundraising strategy, we were very unsuccessful in getting funding, albeit we did have one food sponsor who gave us a fat stack of unlimited Hot Pockets. And so to go through the startup struggles, we decided to eat Hot Pockets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 30 days straight. And and if you've seen the movie Super Size Me, where the actor eats McDonald's for 30 days, that's exactly what we did. One day I looked over at my friend who was working, and he was just physically unable to work. He was sweating, looked really out of shape, and I said, you know what, we're going to have to stop eating Hot Pockets. And we literally went
goodness.
through, yeah, we literally went through a week-long detox where it was actually really painful physically. And then came to, and about a week after that detox, we found a sponsor that set us out on the road and gave us the funding needed to launch a cross-country road trip. We traveled 16,000 miles, 38 states, interviewed 300 people about their career paths, and did it all in an RV. So ended up writing a book about it, and ended up getting the website acquired and going work for the acquiring company. So really, rough start. I think that every startup has its trials and tribulations and unique stories to go back on, but I have never been able to stomach or look at, and it's painful for me to even talk about, a Hot Pocket.
I can understand that. We were talking about stress earlier with Dr. Goman, and it seems to me that Hot Pockets may be adding to your stress and all along those lines. I was curious because you mentioned that you did this cross-country trip where you went to, I'm thinking, all 50 states and all of that. It might have even been some of the territories as well. I don't know if you hit the territories like Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands and some of the other ones that exist. But I was wondering, what is the thing that you learned most in talking to these different entrepreneurs? Because I'm thinking today might have been everybody from restaurant owners to taxi cab company owners to a number of different types of businesses. So was there a common theme that you found in the entrepreneurs?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so we went to 38 states and interviewed more than 300 people with occupations that range from the CEO of MGM Grand to a goat farmer in Tennessee. So wide variety of occupations. I think that the thing that really stood out for me then, and still stands out for me now, is how limited we are in terms of opportunity to share our expertise. And so it's not often that we all get to be on your show, Mark, and talk about the things that we've accumulated in our lifetimes. And that was the biggest surprise then, is that 4 recent college graduates would sit down with someone, and an hour later they had divulged kind of their life stories and their expertise and everything that they had accumulated. Still surprised at that, but now in hindsight can recognize that we all need an outlet to share that expertise. And so that's really at the core of the platform that we run today, called Featured, where people can answer questions and then get their insights featured in more than 500 media outlets and articles that are posted on those sites. But it all goes back to that road trip and just being so surprised that people just need that outlet to share their expertise.
Hey, Brett, one of the things that has surprised me, and it might surprise Dr. Gorman, as well as other people that are listening either now or in the future, is sometimes when I tell people my email address, and you've gotten emails from me, Dr. Gelly has got emails as well, they are surprised that I was able to get that email, because there are a number of blues radio stations that are out there. There are a number of blues radio DJs. There are a number of folks that have that kind of background and all in that space. So the fact that I didn't have to add a number to it, and there might be some other emails that are out there that do have numbers added to them, but the fact that at least in Google, I was able to get bluesradio@gmail.com as the email sometimes shocks people, because they're like, I'm surprised you got it, because it wasn't even in the early days of Gmail. It was actually relatively late. And I would say the same thing to you with Featured, because I remember when my parents had a community radio station, that was actually the name, I want to say, of a show that we did, because they were in community radio. They started a radio station in rural North Carolina in the mid 70s. It was on for 12 years. And as I recall, I think it was called Featured, or I might have had another title with feature in it, where we would feature an artist and all in that space. So we had a feature type thing in that space, because the story that I've told on this show and other shows is my parents, particularly mom, when she would come to pick me up, would do the guilt trip thing, which if you're a parent, you know how the guilt trip works with parents, which is kind of like, we were talking about Wayne earlier, and technology is like, what are you going to do? You just got home, and this is the early 80s that I was doing this, coming back from college. And I'm like, hey, I've not called my friends. And we were using regular rotary phones at that time, not so much cell phones and everything. So I was like, I have no idea. And that's when mom would do the guilt trip, and she would be like, well, I just came to pick you up. And now that since you don't have any plans, I'm going to drop you off at the radio station. You're going to do Feature. I think that was the name of the show and everything. And then you'll stay at the station until about 9 or 10, and then come home and we'll have dinner at that point. So it was the whole guilt trip and all along those lines. But the long and short of that is, how did you manage to get the title Featured? Because it seems to me that would be one that would be out there from everybody from feature films to featured books.
Sure. Yeah. So originally when we started our platform, we named it Turkle. And Turkle was basically a meaning to give voice to the uncelebrated. And so we actually rebranded over to featured.com here about 6 weeks ago or so. 3 years ago, when I was thinking of the idea for the platform, was brainstorming words that I thought made sense, and went to featured.com. It was up for sale at the time. And so I input my contact information. And then 3 years later, the domain broker reached out and said, hey, we're liquidating the portfolio. Would you be interested in purchasing the domain? And gave him probably the lowest offer that he had received, and managed to negotiate our way into acquiring the domain. So nothing magical about being an early adopter and going to a domain broker and typing it in, and there it was. It was really just an acquisition that made a lot of sense for us.
That makes a lot of sense. And if Wayne, who was here earlier, or Dr. Gorman, who is still with us, wanted to be a featured person, or even myself within Featured, how does one become a subject matter expert? I know that I've had her on before, that Dr. Gorman is very much into the dietary space, women's health, and a number of other things that I think that she probably would be able to give you an extensive resume as to why she should be a featured person. But
absolutely happy to talk about it. So you go to featured.com, you sign up, and then there's a list of questions that hopefully pertain to your expertise that you can answer. And so if you put in a 4 to 8 sentence answer, then you could submit that. It goes into our platform. We'll select the best insights based off the expertise of the person who's submitting, and then we'll share that with the publisher for publication. So it's a great way to build up your visibility just by sharing your knowledge. And then, one caveat that I would mention is that we're pretty early into our platform. And so if there's not questions that exist that pertain to your expertise, then you're able to sign up for alerts and just input a couple keywords, and then you'll get email notification when there's new and relevant questions that match that expertise. But really simple, straightforward, sign up, share your knowledge, and get featured.
And
hey,
would that
Brett,
be, go ahead,
how does it differ from Help a Reporter Out? It sounds similar.
Yeah, so it's an alternative to Help a Reporter Out. And so essentially it's better technologies from a matching perspective. So for anyone that's familiar with Help a Reporter Out, essentially the user experience today is you'll sign up, you'll get 3 emails a day with a wide variety of questions. And essentially it's on you as an expert to filter through that and find the questions that really match your expertise. if you sign up for featured, you're going to get very limited amount of emails. The only time we'll email you is when we actually have a question that we believe you're the exact experts to answer. And so the user experience is one of the main differentiators in that. And then also, from the publisher side of asking a question, we're actually creating the content. And so where Help Reporter Out and other platforms will connect the journalist with the source, we're actually foregoing that connection and we're creating the entire piece of content for the publications. And so when Fast Company, for example, as a publisher comes to us and asks a question, we're actually creating the entire piece of that article and then sending it back to their editorial team for review before it gets published.
Hey, Brett, along those same lines, because I've used several people, including all three of you in this particular case, but what is the way that it is differentiated between the podcast guests and some of the and what you're doing? Because it also sounds very similar to what the founders of podcast guests are doing in the sense of being able to provide people like me with a lot of content and people to speak to their topic and everything. And do you ever find that you are, because you're on podcast guests, but you're also in some ways maybe a competitor of podcast guests? Is that a interesting dichotomy that exists as well?
Well, I think that, the existence of podcast guests and featured just shows how hard it is to connect with experts. Like there's always this need to get expert insights because a lot of our knowledge doesn't exist online and there's a need to bring that out continuously. So currently we don't do any kind of podcast connections. It's just text-based where, again, it's a really simple question and answer format. You answer a question, you get your insights featured in an article. Podcast guests, very, very niche in terms of podcast connections. So we haven't yet crossed that bridge, but I think that there's a lot of commonalities between that mission.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. How do the media outlets find out about you as well? Because I know that you are definitely, I'm thinking, being featured on some major outlets, whether that's the New York Times, whether that's the Washington Post, or a number of other things. So how do the experts get in on the opposite direction? So how do the media outlets find out about your company, or is there a already existing relationship with a number of the big time media outlets?
Yeah, there's pre-existing relationships and we're doing direct outreach. The thing that I think is really unique is that we see a lot of experts convert over to a publisher. And so once you get in the habit of actually answering questions, you recognize that you can receive full-length articles that feature expert insights at no cost for your own blog. And so we'll see a lot of people, once they experience that value proposition, jump to the other side and then ask a question and then get an article that's ready to publish. So those are some of the main ways, is direct outreach and then conversion from one side of the marketplace to the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. Brett, just really quickly, and then I'm going to ask you a question that I asked Galia and Wayne when they were on, and all along those lines, because I think that is something that is still pertinent to what you've been doing as well. But before I get to that, I know that I've got a number of friends that are trying to find capital, and you've done a number of businesses. You've definitely done a number of startups. They oftentimes think that they want venture capital, or they sometimes want to do some of the crowdsourcing opportunities, whether that's Patreon or whether that's some of the other ones that exist out there as well. So I was just wondering, what do you think are the keys to getting a venture capitalist to write a check for your startup? Because I know a lot of people will approach folks. I know when a friend of mine was doing a film project, we literally had a meeting at a well-known attorney's office, and it was a fancy office in Raleigh, and we reached out to every doctor, lawyer, Indian chief that we could think about. And when it was time to have the meeting and everything, we think we saw 2 or 3 cars drive by, but nobody actually came up to the meeting. So we had a lot of, speaking of hot pockets, we had a lot of cheese and food and dessert to ourselves and everything, because a lot of people were giving lip service. And I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and I was talking about one of my favorite blues songs, which is Lip Service and Lies. And there was apparently a lot of people that were giving lip service and lies and not really trying to follow up. So we do know that sometimes people will say yes in order to get you out of their hair and all in that space. So what is the keys to getting a venture capitalist or anybody to say yes to investing?
I think it's traction. Like, quite simply, it's traction in your business. It's showing positive momentum. It's showing that you've had some early signs of product market fit in terms of a customer who's willing to pay for your product and service, and that they're continuously willing to pay for your product and service. So I would say that the earlier that you fundraise, the more difficult it is to fundraise, unless you have a prior background where you're the ex-CTO at a notable tech company. So you need traction in order to get it going. For us, we've raised about 1.7 million in venture capital. We've got 4 VCs who are backing featured. And the way that we basically got it across the finish line was showing an up and to the right type of momentum. So the thing that venture capitalists are looking for is not only traction, momentum, double-digit month-over-month growth, but it's also looking at their fund size and saying, can this business actually return the whole fund? So if it's a $20 million fund, can you ultimately sell your business and help that VC get 20 million in their return? And so it's not only got to have traction and fast momentum, but it's also got to be it's got to be able to get to 100 million ARR and have that type of valuation so that that VC can see the return on investment.
Well, I know that the other approach to that is more of the grassroots approach and everything. And I was just wondering whether you did any of that or whether you thought of doing any of that. Because one of the things that comes to my mind is people like Robert Townsend, who was a well-known filmmaker and actor and all in that space. Of course, he also had some TV shows. And I do remember that when he's doing films like Hollywood Shuffle, it was literally making sure that you had, it was kind of like the barbershop approach or the Spike Lee approach of having your more smaller investors, but them all being grouped together, and then hopefully you all have a big win. So I just wondered what your thoughts were around that strategy versus going for the big fish and everything.
Yeah.
Number folks who will go for the, everybody, including my grandma kind of approach.
Yeah, definitely. So the last business that I had, I ran a digital marketing agency. So I got it to rank on the first page of Google for the term digital marketing company, and then decided to actually start a digital marketing company. And so I started that business with $5K in the bank and bootstrapped the whole thing, and got it to a successful acquisition. But I think it just goes into the difference of what are the capital requirements for the business, and what's the goals and trajectory that you want to follow. So for us right now with Featured, it requires us to be a venture-backed business. With the digital marketing company, that's something that we're able to bootstrap and reinvest those profits into the business and grow it substantially over the course of 10 years and lead to an exit. So I think it just goes back to getting really smart about what kind of business that you want to build, what's this definition of success for that, for yourself and for any investors, and seeing where the momentum takes you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This is actually for both you and Dr. Gorman and everything, but both of you are publishers. Wayne was a publisher as well. So what advice would you give to folks that are thinking they want to write a book? Because I know I'm actually helping a friend of mine do their Audible version of the book that they have already published and all along those lines. But I know that there are different ways. And of course, there is this thought pattern that a lot of people have, that we all have a great book in us and all in that space. I don't know that I want to think that there are 8 billion great books, but maybe there are, and everything. So I just wondered, what advice would both of you give for folks that are thinking they want to write a book and get it published? Because I know on a previous show, not this particular show, at least I don't think it was the radio show, it might have been the online dinner party, there was a contrast between, in fact, it was the online dinner party, those that were self-published and those that were part of a publishing house. And some people were feeling that the publishing house was better. Some people, or at least one person, was feeling that the self-published route was better for them. So I just wondered y'all's thoughts about, one, should everybody write a book? And two, what would you say to those that want to write a book? Because like I said, there's that mythology that we all have a great book in us.
Dr. Gorman, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I'll start and then you can share your own experience. I determined when I wrote my first book, which was over 20 years ago, that I was going to be an independent publisher. And that was the right decision for me. And it still is. My What's Your Kryptonite book has been self-published. And we published it internally. And so I think what I would say is two things. One is, if you're going to go to a publishing house, make sure that publishing house is aligned with the type of content that you write. So for example, in my world, the creme de la creme would be Hay House. And so if my What's Your Kryptonite book gets traction and really builds an audience, it's possible that Hay House would come to me, or through some similar process, and want to refresh it and publish that book or another book in a similar kind of series. And so if you if you're just looking for a publisher that you think is going to kind of do all the work for you, that isn't how it happens. And so what ends up happening is a lot of independent, smaller authors get a publishing deal that they assume all they have to do is kind of give them the guts of the book and wash their hands of it. And now it's the publisher's job to get that out there in all the stores and create a buzz around it and all of that. And that's just not the case. And so think it's just really important, if you've got a story in you that needs to be told, 100% tell your story. It goes back to our zone of genius discussion that we were having in the previous segment. So I wouldn't discourage anybody who feels like they have a book in them from writing a book. Just be realistic about like the work that comes, not just writing the book, but getting the book all the way to manuscript, formatting the book so that it looks professional and can sit on a bookshelf if it needs to, and hopefully it will. And then beyond that, marketing the book. And each one of those steps is a job in and of itself. So.
And what's your thoughts around that, Brett, and everything?
Yeah, I think that those are some great thoughts, Dr. Gorman. I think that so it almost goes back to my previous comment around bootstrapping a business or getting venture capital. And it's very similar in terms of should I self-publish and bootstrap, or should I go to a publishing house who are very much like VCs and look at those, what's the return on this, and who am I investing in? And so I think it goes back to that earlier comment about traction. What kind of traction do you have as an author? Do you have a social media following? Do you have a devoted website following that reads your blog posts and things like that? If you're starting from zero, you're probably going to have to go the bootstrapped self-publishing route and prove yourself and build up that momentum. But if you have, that dedicated track record or some sort of thing that is going to allow you to sell yourself to that publisher, then perhaps publishing might be a good route. For me personally, I in 2006 did the first RV road trip, and then tried to write a book about it. And so I hired a literary agent who was going out to all the publishing houses. We had some early signs of traction in terms of a website, but we're totally unsuccessful in doing the publishing route. And so then we decided to eat a bunch of Hot Pockets, get a sponsor, go out on another road trip, and get even more material, build up more momentum. And then ultimately, we convinced a very small publisher to print 1,000 books. And I'll never forget when they arrived. It was a coffee table type of book, and it arrived, and 1,000 books is a lot of books, like physically in the amount of space that it takes. And so we managed and hustled to sell 1,000 books after that. But it was a pretty big undertaking in terms of what that requires, as to Dr. Gorman's point, in terms of what are you going to do to market the book after that? How many public speeches are you going to have to do? How many book signings you got to do? Because I'm here in Phoenix. There's 3 big Amazon warehouses here. And when the 1,000 books arrived, I'm like, okay, great. Let's just take these to Amazon and they'll ship them off. And instead they're like, no, we'll take 2 books. I'm like, 2 books? Like, you have to prove yourself and get it going. So a lot of surprises as a first-time author.
No, it sounds like a whole lot of surprises. Speaking of surprising, what was it like traveling around? Because I actually had a guest on not that long that had traveled in RVs, and I know that RVs can be tremendous vehicles. As a matter of fact, we used them when the Bull Durham Blues Festival was a outside festival at our old ballpark. That a lot of times the RVs would be the celebrities' dressing rooms and all in that space. So we actually would rent some of the ones, I think they were from Carolina RVs or something like that, to be the dressing room. So I know that they can be some tremendous fancy RVs, because a lot of times even celebrities that are going on road trips will use the RVs, but then there are the more compact version. So I'm thinking y'all were doing the more compact version as opposed to the luxury RV. But I could be mistaken. Maybe it was a luxury RV. But what kind of RV was it, and what was the kind of experience of traveling around the country in said RV?
So there's 2 RVs. The first RV, if you've seen Breaking Bad, it is the same RV in Breaking Bad. It's this old 1986 Fleetwood Bounder, and the thing broke down all the time, and there was nothing luxurious about it. Second RV that we had actually got us across the country. I think it was about a 30-foot RV. Biggest surprise is that you don't need a special license to drive an RV. Anyone with a driver's license can hop behind a wheel, which is very frightening. And RVs are like very, big and tough to drive. I think the learning from that and being 22, 23 years old driving an RV across the country is that in general, people will want to help you on the road. If they see an RV with the blinker, they'll kind of like let you in. And if you start going that way, you better be sure that that person's braking and letting you in. So besides that, very tough and challenging to drive an RV through Manhattan, through Boston, through, some different places there. We, again, like people will kind of conspire to help you out. We had multiple, I guess the other tip here is that duct tape is your best friend, because we had to duct tape the awning a few times. We had to duct tape a gutter that, we tore off, like whole deal. Our RV life is very different. And after 4 months on the road, that's a long time to be on a road in an RV. Like you become a different person and your reality kind of warps a little bit.
No, I can definitely see that. And I have a scarier fact for you. And it was based on a friend of mine that was a pilot. And I don't know if it's still the case, but it is my understanding, or at least it used to be the case, after 9/11, and I know the day is 9/11, they may have changed the rules and everything. But I want to say that I was told this even after 9/11 was that you can literally fly a plane without necessarily being the same age as a high school kid and all along those lines. So I think that is an even scarier thought, that somebody could be flying a plane at like say 15 or 16, whereas I think that the license for most adults is around 18 or 19 for a car. So the fact that you can fly a plane quicker than you can fly a car or ride a car is scary to me. And like I said, I'd have to do some double checking, and the folks are watching and want to cross check me or cross reference me. But I was told that by a pilot type that you can actually fly at a earlier age than you can definitely get your license and all in that space. And I don't know if you had heard anything similar, either Dr. Gorman or Brett, but that is something that I heard some time back.
I actually have my pilot's license, and I do not recall. I mean, I was way past 16 when I got my pilot's license, but I do not recall hearing that you could get your pilot's license at 16. Maybe that isn't the case, but you actually, once you get to kind of more advanced years, senior years, you have to regularly get rechecked, and you can't fly as you get older without regularly getting rechecked. So that would be kind of interesting that if you're young, even if you're young and your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed and you're trying to make adult decisions, that's not a problem, but it is a problem if you are a little advanced in age, and they want to make sure they check you out regularly.
Yep, and just to make sure that I was not mistaken, I just looked up well, that's for the going the other way, but I'm gonna double check this the other age, and I'll double check because they were saying that there is no, you can fly even as you get older, but I'm gonna see if there is a minimum
Hey,
age.
while you're doing that, Mark, I gotta address the Hot Pockets thing,
Yes.
And so I just thought that was so interesting what Brett said, that after eating Hot Pockets for an extended period of time, they both were seriously toxic, right? And so I think it's really fascinating. It's a great example, because normally if we're eating Hot Pockets or the equivalent, we're not doing that day in and day out, like 3 meals a day, right? We're just sprinkling in this unhealthy, toxic food, and our body just manages to handle it. It is, though, building up toxicity. So it's fascinating when you look at an experiment, if you will, like that, where you see the signs of the toxicity, that your body just hits the point where it cannot manage it. As opposed to when we kind of like drip feed our body the toxicity, somehow our amazing human body manages to stay one step ahead of it. But over time, the toxicity still accumulates.
Yeah, the toxicity is still there and everything. And I did find out, because this is from a website called flyingmagazine.com, and it says that there is no minimum age when it comes to learning how to operate an aircraft. Some people started training with a qualified instructor as young as 11 or 12 years old. However, there's an age requirement for obtaining a student pilot license. You only need to be 14-year-olds to get a student's pilot license, but that only permits the operation of balloons and gliders. So how old do you have to be to fly an airplane? Also, there's no specific age requirement to taking flying lessons. However, you do have to be at least 16 years old to legally fly solo. So you got to be 16 to fly solo. And I know some, like I said, my nephews are 14 and 15. So that means next year they could really be flying. And I'm not sure that I want them flying in the air at 16 and all in that space. So they definitely said that the minimum age is 16.
So
or
it's
14.
basically the same as driving a car.
Right.
Yeah.
It's similar to driving a car, exactly. So it's the same age range and all in that space. But yeah, like I said, I'm not sure about 16-year-olds flying the planes and all in those lines. That might be a little bit scary and all in that space. But yeah, it does look like it is at that same area and all in that kind of way. Brett, one question I have for you, and we get ready to wrap up very shortly and all and everything. But one thing that I was curious about, and it's something that you kind of alluded to earlier. We know that there's been all kinds of conversations about companies being acquired. I mean, what we're using, this platform, StreamYard, was acquired by Hopin. I think Hopin was acquired by somebody else recently, so it's like actually been double acquired. And I forgot who the other. It was like a major Ring Central, I think it was, that acquired Hopin and all in that space. So, what is the key to getting a company acquired? Should you have a company, and at what point do you make that decision to sell your company? Because, like I said, I met a couple of the executives at StreamYard, thought that they were doing a great job, and then I looked around, I think it was last year, and I was like told that they had been bought by Hopin, and then, like I said, I recently read that Hopin had been acquired by, I think it was Ring Central. So it does seem like there's this constant movement of companies buying each other. So how does one determine that?
Yeah. So in terms of what makes a company acquirable, I think it comes down to either technology, profit, or a customer list. Like, what's the real asset that a acquiring company is going to acquire from yours, and what's that worth? And so if it's strictly a profit perspective, there's a multiple on that. So and it depends by industry, but let's just say, for an example, it's 2 to 6x on profit. So you can basically calculate off of that. If you've got some proprietary technology that allows an acquiring company to get a competitive advantage, then I think that's probably the best situation that you could be in from an acquiring position. And then ultimately, like, what's your customer list look like, and how much upsells could potentially happen from the acquisition of that list. Those are some of the main reasons why a company would be acquired. And then in terms of why, as a founder, do you want to sell your company? I think that also varies. I think that sometimes you might look at the upside and look at the timing of it all, and is there an intersection where that ultimately makes sense? I've talked with a lot of founders who have been running, very, very profitable large businesses, and made the decision to sell, either because they looked at the forecast and said, you know what, this might be the pinnacle of this industry, and we might be at that point, and we might have a couple years of growth after that, but then we could probably see some things subsiding. So I think it just goes back to timing, both industry perspective, company perspective, founder perspective. For me personally, I decided to sell for 2 reasons. One was basically I wanted to focus on featured, and thought that there was more upside with another company. So in order to fully commit to that, I had to sell my other company to eliminate the distractions. And then 2, it was also 10 years. And once you hit the 10-year mark, that just feels like this invisible mark where founders are like, okay, I've been at this 10 years. It's time to turn the page. And so usually when I talk to other founders who are like 7, 8, 9 years in, I know that it's about to be that time when they're going to start thinking about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This is actually for both of you. And then, like I said, there's the question I'm going to ask you, and then there's one to ask both of you, and then we'll wrap it all up and everything. But the thing that I was just thinking about is the whole notion of founders and all along those lines and all in that space. So, what do you think is the life work balance that you have to deal with? That's where I was going with that question, because I know then that's what I said, it was both of you, that a lot of times we want to balance their life. Fortunate or unfortunate as the case may be, to still be in that single lane, but I do like to devote some time to some of the multiple jobs that I have, as well as family, like my younger brother and my two nephews when I can see them, and of course having living parents that are in their 80s and all in that space. But how do you do that work-life balance? Because a lot of things that I find with a lot of entrepreneurs is that is their elephant in the room, because they're trying to figure out how they can balance their life and not go crazy in terms of losing some of the other perspectives that exist in their life. So I'll start with you, Brett, but I also want to hear from Dr. Gorman. How do you do that life work balance? I don't know if you got a other half or if there is a other interest that you have as well, but how do you balance that life work balance?
I think that so first of all, this is the worst part for any founder, especially at a very, very early stage startup. It's like, there's no way that I think that you could legitimately have balance when you're at an early stage startup. Now, so I've got 3 kids, 10, 7, and 4. I'm married, been married for a while. And like, quite honestly, I think that the answer is minimizing the amount of things that are actually in your life. Like for me, kids, wife, work, and road biking. Like that's pretty much all I do. Like stay fit, work really, really hard to get that positive momentum that's happening within the business, and stay committed to the most important people that are in your life. Like there's not room in your life for anything else. And so I guess the answer for me personally is just staying hyper focused on what's really important, and like not being open for X amount of time until the business starts to accelerate, where you could even open up your life for other things. So it sucks. That's the reason why people will tell you that startups are hard, and they're not lying, because when you jump into it, you're like, this is way harder, like way, way, way harder than anyone would ever tell you. And they try to tell you, but you don't believe it, because like even now in hindsight, if I knew what I knew, like now what I should have known then, people wouldn't even start, because you have to be crazy to do what this is. And it's like and you have to be crazy to continue. So, for me, work-life balance is a sore subject. It's find the right partner in your life that could support you in your journey. It's involving your kids in your life. So frequently I'm taking them, to the office to show them where dad hangs out. Take your kid to work day is something that I treat as a holiday, where I don't miss that for the last 10 years, and always involving kids in that. So if you could do all those things, then you try to make the most of it. But Dr. Gorman, I don't know what you think.
I have a program, I call it the MOLT method. And MOLT is an acronym: mindset, order, lifestyle, and toxins. And the MOLT method basically is designed to reverse the effects of chronic stress. And if you don't reverse the effects, it will become toxic, and dis-ease leads to disease. So that's like in a nutshell. But you're 100% right. There really is seasons of your life where balance is not even an option, and all you're going to do is cause yourself more stress trying to create balance. But one thing I will say, getting back again, Brett wasn't here for our discussion about zone of genius before, but when you're talking about zone of genius, there's a element of creativity and problem solving that bubbles up when we give ourselves a little wiggle room and not just grinding it out. And so, one of the things you said you do, Brett, is road biking, I think is what you said, right? You bike. Yep. And I'm sure when you get out there on the road, just like zoned in and going, you'll have ideas that you can bring back to the business that allow you to sort of machete through a problem in a way that just sitting there staring at the computer grinding away was not going to get it done. And so I think that rather than calling it work-life balance, which I believe we're in agreement doesn't really exist, especially for any of us that are kind of entrepreneurial and making it happen kind of thing. What is important is to make sure you're prioritizing ways that you foster creativity, because fostering creativity, when I talk about it that way, then I don't have the same guilt as I have that, oh, I didn't put in like 20 hours today. If I say, you know, this is my time when I like really let my mind just wander so that I can let solutions bubble up. Now, all of a sudden, that time that I might have characterized as downtime becomes my most productive time. You know, my morning time where I meditate and I do my thing, like that is my most productive time of the day. The rest of the time is me just like, you know, trying to solve another problem, another problem, another problem. You know, if I'm trying to really come up with a creative solution, and you know, I deal with a lot of patients that have really odd combination of symptoms and situations that just are not going to be solved by some, you know, opening up a book and reading, you know, here's what you do when this happens. You know, my patients don't have anything that like shows up in a textbook, right? So I've got to be creative and make sure I have enough space for those unique solutions to come to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to that real quick, I think that's actually one of Google's values as a company is you don't have to be at your desk to be at work. And so they're frequently encouraging you to, you know, walk around the Googleplex, come up with different solutions. And I find that to be very true. Like here at my office, I'm in the Industrious. It's a co-working space, and we work out of Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall. And so it's literally a mall. It's right next to the Apple Store. And I'm frequently, you know, it's an 8-minute walk to Dior and back. And I will take that walk and I'll come up with solutions, you know, pretty frequently to some different stuff. So to Dr. Gorman's point, it's just all about, you know, change of scenery and refreshing the body every once in a while.
Yeah, that's one of the things I missed. Like I said, the company I worked with, the measurement, the grading company, literally used to be in a mall as well. So I did enjoy having different food options and different things to break that monotony of doing the testing. And then we went back to the home office, and then we went virtual. So now it's all virtual and everything. But that is one of the things I missed, was having that diversity and being able to, you know, if I want to go to a bookstore, they might be in the mall. If I wanted to go to a restaurant and take that break, because it was literally there in the mall, similar to what it sounds like your space is.
Well, look, it's 110 degrees in Scottsdale, man. You gotta stay in some air conditioning. You can't take a walk anywhere but other than the mall. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
My first book was, I use a process called a blueprint, which is a little more expanded than an outline whenever I write a book. And my first book was blueprinted on cocktail napkins over a glass of wine at a bar in Scottsdale.
Hey, where innovation happens.
So, you know, and that literally, like, I think actually in one of my files, because that was back in the analog days, right? We didn't have all the technology we have now. I think I still have that stack of napkins somewhere in some file drawer.
Somewhere this file's still there, and then you had that birth and all along those lines. Hey, Brett, just really quickly, well, getting to that last question I'm going to give you, but one of the founders of the network oftentimes talks about education and talks about the need for education and even teaching fiscal responsibility and entrepreneurship. He's actually an entrepreneur. Nick Palveda is a pension attorney. His business partner, Kim, is a inventor, and he definitely has some patents in that space and all along those lines. But they are sometimes frustrated by the fact that business isn't truly taught. Do you think that that is something that you wish you had been, because you kind of alluded to it earlier, that you had been taught more of when you were in both, I would even argue going as far up as college, but do you wish that you had more business knowledge in terms of your education?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that mainstream education teaches you the fundamentals, but where you ultimately have to get is educating yourself through almost micro education on, here's this problem that I'm dealing with in business, and seek out the people who have the expertise to help you break through with that. So personally with Featured, we've got an advisory team that I'll rely on and we've built that I'll go to for questions. So so we've got Eric Rice, who's the author of The Lean Startup. He's one of our advisors, former CTO of Answers.com, Curtis Strite, and then Linda Mann, who's the former SVP of Commerce for Wirecutter. And so we've got, the technical, we've got really practical business things. And then we've got, on the publisher side, a lot of questions that we could go to on that. And it's always seeking out those core people, and then also going a step deeper to figure out who really has like hyper-focused expertise that can help you break through those different things. So yeah, I think that there's a responsibility to educate yourself through microeducation, through conversations, and then, what you can seek out through courses and books and things like that.
No doubt about that. You heard Dr. Gorman mention this earlier, and that was the last question I was going to get to you before giving you the question that I gave Wayne for both of you. But to you, Brett, you heard us earlier talking about this notion of geniuses coming and the kryptonite, which is actually what Dr. Gorman was talking about as well. I said earlier that one of my kryptonites was foreign language because I knew that I was weak at that, still consider myself weak at that as well. So what do you consider your genius, but also what do you consider that you are still a work in progress and it is your kryptonite as well? Because we all have something that we are very good at and that is our strong suit, and we all have our weak suit as well. So what do you consider those in your life?
Man, my weakness is not eating on schedule and thinking of a good answer for the weakness. But seriously, like I get too into, and like maybe nutrition's the weakness, honestly, from a daily perspective. I rely too much on coffee and then, get a little exhausted. But no, strength, taking ownership. I think that's probably the one thing that most people I've worked for and clients that I've worked for have said about me is that if I get given something, it gets done. And that's, not to be taken for granted. So I think taking ownership is great. And then honestly, like maybe the weakness is actually what I went to school for, which was accounting. And I went to school as an accountant, became an auditor. And to this day, like I'll still rely on bookkeepers and financial consultants to help with financial forecasts and things like that. I might have majored in accounting for the challenge and less for the interest. And I think that still might persist with me today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that the other weakness that I have, and most, which is unusual for entrepreneurs, but we can sometimes out-talk ourselves. So I know that one of my weaknesses, in addition to the foreign languages, is I am notorious for procrastinating. Matter of fact, I'm sitting there looking at the house around me and going like, yeah, this house needs some serious cleaning. And I probably procrastinated on that for the last several weeks, and I'll probably, hopefully get unprocrastinated on that aspect in the next day or two. So definitely that is one of my weaknesses, even though I know that that is not a forefront of something that you should be doing on the entrepreneur or the business side. But yeah, I know that I've seen a couple of projects. I'm sitting here looking at a disc that is in my computer that is of some stuff that needs editing and probably needed editing a couple of months ago. And I've mentioned the Audible project that I'm still procrastinating on. So I've got to get past that procrastination and all along those lines.
Nice. Yeah. I usually use the Eisenhower method to talk about what's urgent and not important. And then you're supposed to basically like delete the stuff that's not important and not urgent, the stuff that sits around forever, and just remove it off your list. And then there's the delegation important stuff that's urgent but not important. And that's the stuff you just go hire a contractor for and get it done. So a lot of stuff to do. All of us have a long to-do list, but if you can have some sort of matrix to help you prioritize and make progress, then maybe you feel guilty less.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I said, get ready to wind up. The question I asked Wayne at the end, and I'll ask both of you and all, is if you're tough folks, how you can be reached and all along those lines. And we'll probably go, we'll start off with you and then end with the lady at all in that space. I started to go ladies first, but I think we'll start with Brett and then close out with the lady in the room, and all in that kind of way. But definitely, if you can tell folks how you can be reached. And like I said, this is a global network. Pod TV is. So if there is a message of positivity and hope that you would like to share with our global community, I'm sure that they would love to hear this. And we do air this show both live now as well as several times during the course of the weekend, even the couple of weeks, and all along those lines. So any message of positivity and hope that you would love to share with the global community, and how you can be reached and how folks can get involved with Featured and some of your other businesses also.
Sure. So Brett Farmelo, I can be reached at featured.com. You can answer questions and get featured in more than 500 media destinations. My email is brett@featured.com. one of our core values is you are unique, and that's respecting the uniqueness of every human being. And so that oftentimes can be interpreted as respect the people around you, but it's really respecting yourself and knowing that you're a miracle that can't be repeated. And so know that you are unique and have that confidence to adjust the day and go about your life. So I think that's my message of positivity.
Sounds great and everything. Definitely can't wait to hear from Dr. Gorman. It's interesting you said that, because before you got on, I had mentioned that there is a Black Business Olympics that a friend of mine does, and part of his one of his major sponsors is Bruce George, who comes out of the hip hop world, and that's where his notion is of the genius is common, which is a similar kind of notion, which is that we all have a genius. So you might not be a mental genius, you might be the best bicyclist in the world, you might be the best cook in the world, but that is your genius, and that is kind of what he has done, is have a series of YouTube. You can actually look at the Genius is Common movement on YouTube, and you'll see that there are a variety of people that are sharing what their genius is. There's one friend of mine that is a cook, and she does a lot of spices, so she talks about that as being her genius. There's another one that is a motivational speaker. There's an entire school of musicians that are in there. They'll talk about how their genius is their different forms of music from their music school that they are all part of. But that's definitely something that I believe we all have, is a genius and a gift that we are supposed to share with the world.
Absolutely.
Dr. Gorman, your thoughts and everything?
Yeah, so I encourage my readers to become their own PCP, and that is your primary care person. You know best what works for you, and when you've got kryptonite in your environment that needs to be dealt with. And so just keep in mind that you're your best care person. And then you can find me at drgala.com. That's drgala.com. And if you go to the homepage there and you scroll down, you will see an easy link to go to Amazon and buy my book. You can subscribe to my newsletter. I send out a newsletter almost every Sunday, just kind of giving you some updates on my philosophy and current approach to situations related to health and well-being, optimizing health and well-being. And then if you scroll on down to the bottom, you will see all of my social media badges, so you can connect with me on your social media channel of choice.
Sounds great. And like I said, I know Dr. Gorman has been on the show before. I hope that you will make it back on a future show as well, Brett. And by the way, I'm loving that name, because that's actually the name of one of my best friends and everything. So that's why it's easier to say your name and all along those lines. And in that space, he actually has one of the longest running open mics here in Durham, North Carolina. I want to say it's been going on for about 20 or 25 years, where he's been definitely reaching out and finding some tremendous talent, including some names that you may know, like Sunshine Anderson and others that were found at that particular location, and all in that space. We had both seasoned musicians as well as those that are less seasoned, that are always showing their music, and they've been in various venues. Right now they're at the Blue Note Grill, where they have been for several years, and they are doing that every Wednesday afternoon. So like I said, I want to say he's coming up on 25 years. It might even be close to like 30 years. So he has definitely found his different gifts, because he is also a professor at North Carolina Central University and a Duke graduate as well. So he's definitely found, and a former television producer. So he's definitely found a lot of things that have been his gift, and there's definitely one that is doing that in that space and all along those lines. But like I said, Brett, I do hope that you will return. I hope that Wayne will return. Dr. Galia has been on a couple of times, and I know she's always welcome to come back. So we do hope that you will make a return trip, whether it's the radio show, whether it's the online dinner party, whether it's World Edition, or a number of our other shows, including a sports show, because we just started a sports show today, and literally it started in its first episode, and it is run, speaking of folks that are doing their best, it is run by George Washington University students. So these are students of both the graduate department as well as some that are getting their master's degree in sports and sports management and all in that space. So they premiered their show today on Monday morning, and I think it'll be every Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So they'll be talking about everything from soccer to rugby to hockey to baseball to basketball to even some sports that aren't as well known and having some great interviews. So that is one of our newer shows that has come up, as well as a world politics show that will roll out today. And I just got a call from somebody that'll be bringing back their relationship show, Relationship Soup, and that'll be coming our way in October. So we're always adding new programming here on the network as well. And on that note, we're going to get out of here with the same robot that we came on in and all in that space. And I hope to see both of you back in the very near future.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Thanks,
and
Mark.
nice chatting with you, Brett.
Yeah, you as well. See
Okay.
y'all.
See you.
Bye-bye.